Hola, buenas tardes. Pardon the technical difficulties. This wouldn't be a technology session if we didn't have them. But thank you all so very much for joining us. I am delighted to be your MC for this session. My name is Vanessa Aguiar. I am a CHCI Public Policy Fellow presented by Open Society. And it is my great pleasure today to introduce our first speaker, which will be Congressman Richie Torres, who represents the 13th District of New York. The representative is a fighter from the Bronx who has spent his entire life working for the community he calls home. Like many people from the South Bronx, poverty and struggle have never been abstractions to him, and he governs from a place of lived experience. In 2013, at age 25, Richie became New York City's youngest elected official and the first openly LGBTQ person elected to office in the Bronx. So again, it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce the congressman up here. So can we please give it up for the congressman?
Woo! I should begin with a disclaimer. My name is Richie Torres. I am not an AI model.
That's good.
And I'm Richie with a T because in 1987, my mother was watching the movie La Bamba. And she named me after Richie Valens. And she named my brother after the Reuben sandwich, from which I inferred that I'm clearly the favorite son. But this is by far the most important panel in the whole conference, because I would submit to you that AI will prove to be the most revolutionary technology of our time. That the advent of generative AI is going to be every bit as consequential as the invention of writing and the invention of the printing press, because like the printing press, like writing, it's a technology that's going to revolutionize how we communicate and therefore revolutionize how we live. Right? If you look at history, it's no accident that after the printing press came the Protestant Reformation, the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, the Enlightenment. And so generative AI has the potential to usher in a new scientific revolution, a new industrial revolution. And that's a level of change that none of us have ever experienced before. You know, at the heart of generative AI are these large language models, and it's been said that these large language models engage in emergent capabilities, which are capabilities that the creators of the systems do not themselves understand. And as these large language models become larger, these models will emerge with even more capabilities that we cannot understand. And there's no telling where those capabilities will lead us and what those capabilities will be. And so the central challenge of our time is to figure out, how do we regulate AI? How do we make it work for our society? How do we make it work for the Latino community? If we over-regulate AI, we're going to lose the technological competition to foreign adversaries like China, Russia, and all the rest. But if we under-regulate AI, you know, we're in danger of becoming Dr. Frankenstein. We might be creating a technology that we neither fully understand nor can control, and we could see deep fakes, deep mass disinformation, disemployment, and in the worst case scenario, even mass destruction. So we as a society have to figure out how we're going to regulate AI, how we're going to make it work for the Latino community. You might have read in the New York Times at CUNY, which is the largest municipal university in the country, John Jay actually harnessed the power of AI to identify students who are struggling academically, provide those students with more individualized support, and it actually raised graduation rates by 32%. So that's one example of the enormous amount of good that AI can do in lifting up the Latino community. And so I hope that all of us are thinking about, how do we use this powerful new technology to revolutionize education and healthcare and all these critical public goods for the benefit, for the uplift of the Latino community. And so on that note, I will leave you. And again, I want to echo, I'm not an AI model. But maybe my constituents will one day conclude that they'll be more effectively represented by AI systems than by members of Congress. So anyway, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Congressman Torres. Now it's time for our first speaker of the session, Stephanie J. Peters, Esquire. Stephanie serves as a Senior Director of Congressional Affairs for the House of Representatives at Microsoft. She began her career in Washington as a law clerk with the Senate Judiciary Committee's Subcommittee on Technology and the Law. Since then, she has enjoyed a number of professional successes, including having assisted in drafting the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and serving as a lead Judiciary Democratic Counsel for floor consideration of the 1996 immigration reform legislation. In her international practice, Ms. Peters focused on global sustainability and supply chain issues for major corporate clients and foreign sovereign representation, primarily in the sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. So it is my honor and pleasure to introduce her and have her up here. So let's please welcome Stephanie J. Peters.
Good afternoon. I am delighted to be here. Microsoft has been a long partner of CHCI, and we're delighted to have this discussion and distinguished panel. Microsoft is committed to advancing AI that respects human rights, values, diversity, promotes inclusion. We believe that AI must be developed and deployed in ways that benefit everyone, especially the Latino community and other communities that have been historically marginalized. I could say a lot more, but I don't want to hold up this amazing panel. We have already worked with Congressman Torres. We are so delighted that he was the lead member to introduce this panel and also advocate for this panel. This is a critically important conversation. We have to make sure that our communities are involved in the entrepreneurship, the services, the education, everything that AI has to offer, as the Congressman so eloquently said. So with that, thank you, welcome, and I want to turn it over to this dynamic panel for a dynamic discussion.
Thank you again, Ms. Peters. It's now time for me to introduce our session moderator, Maria Cardona. She is a public policy advocate and political strategist. Ms. Cardona has more than 2 decades of experience in government, political, and public relations and community affairs as well. She is a principal at the Dewey Square Group, where she leads the organization's multicultural and public affairs practices. In addition to her work in the political and community affairs spaces, Ms. Cardona is also known for her work as a political commentator and is currently a CNN and CNN en Español political contributor. She is regarded as one of the nation's top 100 most influential Latinos. So without further delay, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Ms. Maria Cardona.
Thank you. Gracias. Muchas gracias. Vanessa, muchas gracias. CHCI, thank you. Microsoft, thank you so much for hosting this really important and what I just find a fascinating conversation about what AI can mean to the Latino community. And I'm going to introduce this august panel to help me have this discussion. And of course, we're just scratching the surface here. But I think it's so important to have these conversations front and center, because I feel like we are all on the brink of this, right? And we have the opportunity as a Latino community to be not just a convener of these conversations, but to be proactive and to be the innovators here. And I think with companies like Microsoft and with organizations like Unidos and AFL, I really think we have such a tremendous opportunity for the Latino community to be leaders in this space. That doesn't come without risks, right? Like the congressman said, there is a huge balance that we need to hit here in order to get this right, and in order to get this right for so many folks in our community who are on the brink of being able to succeed, but are also on the margins of not being able to really reach the American dream if we don't give them the tools. This could be a huge purveyor of those tools to reach that. So without further ado, let me introduce my amazing panel. To my immediate left, we have Ms. I'm sorry,
It's okay, it's Allison.
Allison Knox. I was thinking Amanda, but then I was getting you two mixed up. Allison. And Allison and I go way back because we had this amazing project that we worked on some years ago focused on STEM. And so I feel like we're just coming full circle. So thank you so much, Allison. Allison is a Senior Director of Education Policy at Microsoft Philanthropies. She serves as an advocate in the federal and state levels for the company's positions on STEM education, particularly computer science, technology and education, and student privacy. Thank you so much for being here, Allison. We have Claudia Ruiz, who is the Senior Civil Rights Analyst at Unidos US. She's an advocate for policy reforms and civil rights protections that promote equity and inclusion for the Latino community. Claudia, bienvenida. Thank you for being here. Then we have Amanda Ballantyne, the Executive Director of the AFL-CIO Technology Institute. Amanda works to develop strategies to engage workers in the innovation process. She has nearly 20 years of progressive organizing, policy, and legal experience in unions and NGOs. Thank you so much for being here, Amanda. And last but not least, we have Frank Valdivieso, right?
Yes.
I got it. President and CEO of Griffin Consulting, where they assess, design, build, deploy, and manage networks. Thank you so much for being here, Frank. So we've done, I think, already the sort of level setting of what this conversation is, the importance of it, the future of it, what it can mean to the Latino community. But I think let's start from the beginning, because I want to make sure that everyone is starting out from sort of the same knowledge points. Generative AI. What is it? It's a big question, right? I'm gonna pose that to everyone so that everyone can kind of come at it from the different perspectives.
I mean, in general, it's a way for an algorithm to make sure that it is taking a whole bunch of different sets of data, and it's learning from that data, and it's providing new responses to ideas, and it could be a query. That's the large language model that a lot of people are familiar with. But I think of it as a way for different data sets to kind of learn from each other and then come up with a new response to different ways of querying it. So that's my general way of responding, but others may have a different way of discussing it.
Well, I think a way of talking about generative AI is how normal people who maybe aren't computer scientists experience it. And in the past, since last November, obviously the major headline has been ChatGPT and the various applications that are related to ChatGPT. And in my world, which is the labor movement and the worker rights movement, there are big questions. There are questions about how can workers use this technology effectively and safely. There are also questions about, is this going to automate work that we didn't expect to be automated by artificial intelligence? So from the labor movement, from our perspective, it's an extremely powerful and very new sort of commercially available technology that can do a lot of things and that is really learning and developing quickly. There are a lot of questions. I mean, we're sort of living through a live action experiment now,
Right.
in what this technology does and how it will impact us, right? And the exciting thing about that, I mean, certainly there are challenges and risks, but the exciting thing about that is there's an opportunity to shape it, right? And I think that's what we're all interested in talking about here.
Right. Claudia, what are the things that I think strikes fear in the hearts of a lot of Latinos when they hear about new technologies is a lot of them are in the workforce. They remember, and workers in general, how automation shifted industries. What do you see in the work that you do in terms of the things that we need to address for Latino workers to make sure that they're not afraid of it, that they can really come at it from a standpoint of this being an opportunity, and what are those opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of round out kind of what Amanda was talking about, is that I think it's important to always start with the idea that AI, just like any other technological innovation, is a tool. right? It is a tool that we have the power to direct and deploy in ways that can maximize potential and minimize risk and harm. And so I think that as long as we level set and keep that frame, without letting the wonders or the promises of generative AI run away with us, I think that it's really important to kind of cabin right just what exactly generative AI is and the impacts that it has. I think when it comes to the workforce, right, again, there's so much talk about the ways in which it can improve efficiency, the ways in which it can open up new emerging sectors, right? It's going to open up millions and millions of new jobs. But I think that there is sort of this idea, this fallacy, that technology is like a field of dreams. If you build it, workers will come, right? But we've already seen how if we're not actually deploying and implementing technology, and tech in particular in the right way, it can actually create more harm than the good that we set out for. So, for example, I frequently kind of begin any kind of conversation around AI reminding people that 35% of Latinos currently do not have access to home internet. 35%. Okay, and so if we're now on top of that, also beginning to talk to them about AI, about ChatGPT, about automation, you can imagine, right, just how daunting and really kind of an existential threat it becomes. So something that we talk about a lot at Unidos is making sure that we have and are investing in the human infrastructure that needs to go along with deploying these tools. That applies to actually going into communities, supporting them with whether it's grants, trainings, partnering with corporations, partnering with the companies that are responsible for building these models and making sure that Latinos and communities of color and other historically marginalized communities are brought in from the very beginning so that we are designing the implementation models alongside the tech itself.
Frank, did you want to add?
Yeah, so in terms of, from my perspective, so I'm a small business owner. I see, and what we see in our community in terms of the power of AI is really to help us be even more competitive, right? So it's leveraging this technology to improve our ability to compete in the marketplace. The other thing that we do, and I'll just talk from my perspective in terms of what we focus on, is helping nonprofits, right? So I think there's a huge opportunity for nonprofits here to leverage this technology to really service the people in the communities. When we think about our community specifically, it's the nonprofits that are really delivering those services that our community isn't getting by traditional means. So I do see this as being a real platform to really empower the organizations, empower us as small business owners, and empower organizations. But to your point, Claudia, I think it is a tool. And we do have to overcome some really major obstacles, which is if we don't have access to internet, then we can't get access to this wonderful technology. So one of the things I like to talk about too is, what's my superpower? Again, for those of you who've probably been watching Deion Sanders and what he's doing in Colorado, one of the things I love about what he is doing is really identifying the superpower in each of his players. And I think there's superpowers in each of us that kind of help with this process. Again, as a small business owner, what I'm trying to do is create opportunities, right? Leveraging AI, where I can then in turn hire people from my community to make a better life for themselves, give them opportunities, and open up opportunities for more people in our community specifically.
Allison, you wanted to expound on something.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Claudia brought up a couple of really important points. The internet access being one. Microsoft, we've really leaned in on the whole idea of digital equity, and we see it as an affordable device, affordable access to the internet, as well as some basic digital skills. And we actually lobbied for the Digital Equity Act, which many of you know is flowing now through states. And we partner with groups like the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. We have dashboards that are available to help communities figure out where are the inequities and where can we go and solve issues and problems and bring programs. And I loved one thing that Claudia said is that people feel overwhelmed already by existing technology. And I just wanted to share a quick story. I'll try to make it really quick, I promise. But in January, when our company started to talk about AI, and we are all on this journey together. Yeah. We are very humble in this journey. The first thing that I did, and my office is literally across the street, is I had 7 roundtable discussions. And I just brought in education people and workforce folks, and I said, what's getting you excited about what you're hearing and seeing, and what is really making you afraid, right? And there was a principal of a very close by elementary school who more than 50% of her students were Latinx. And she said exactly that. She said, this might be the perfect technology ever, but my teachers are exhausted. And there is risk every day, and our students are emotionally overwrought. And I'm here to tell you that unless you make this stuff, whatever it is, work for me, it's too much, right? So I heard that, and so at the end of the roundtable discussion, I said, could I demonstrate our Bing tool really quickly, and could I use you, principal, to show how it could maybe lighten your load? And she's like, okay, but she was pretty much like, this stuff is never coming into my school, right? And I get it, those were the roundtables. Like it's like been a two-way dialogue, I'm just letting you know. Anyway, so I asked her, I said, what's a task that you face every week that you may not enjoy doing? And she said, well, don't tell my parents this, but I have to write a parent newsletter. Every Friday I have to send it out. And I said, okay, so I put into Bing Chat, create parent newsletter. And then I said, tell me what you're going to talk about on Friday. And she said, it's Black History Month, so I wanted to let them know that certain standards are being hit. And I'm like, discussing Black History Month in K-5 social studies standards being met. And then she said, I also want to talk about the traffic safety issues around the school because people are getting picked up and you all can relate. I put that in as well. And then I hit enter, and we all kind of waited, and I thought, oh my God, I hope that this thing comes up with something, right? Because she already kind of is not into this. And it was a wonderful first draft. And she looked at me and she said, can I have this now?
Yay!
And I don't say this for gotcha purposes.
Yeah.
Because we looked at it, to your point, Claudia, it has to be a co-pilot situation, right? It has to be human-centric because she found errors.
Yeah.
Some of the links didn't actually perfectly work. But she said, this is going to save me so much time with that first draft. And that's when I knew, as a former educator, that I could get up in front of audiences and say, there's something here.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. Amanda, what are some of the things that you hear from workers, or that you think will be sort of the fears from workers, outside of the obvious? But I have to suspect that there is, kind of like the teacher, the principal, an overwhelming feeling of what is this going to mean for me in my future?
I think that's right. And what I would say is, workers have a really diverse set of perspectives about technology. And I think in general, there's an assumption that the labor movement is really anti-technology. We're actually just pro-worker, right? And so our questions about technology really stem from the conversations we have with workers in the work sites that we represent every day. And what we hear are questions about, is this technology going to make my job safer? Is it going to make it faster, more effective? Is it going to automate the parts of my job that I love? And then leave me in a sort of situation where I'm managed by an app or a bot that isn't connecting with me as a human being, right? These are real important questions about the dignity
can we
of work.
bring up the strike, right? Because that's the writer's strike. That's one of the concerns, right?
Yeah, and so when we talk to the writers, I mean, I think that there's a real tension. And what I say is that this technology, it's not neutral, right? It's very impactful, but it really comes down to how employers are implementing it.
Right.
We're really focused on worker voice, right? And so for the writers, they are looking at an existential question of, are we going to become copy editors? How are we going to make money? How are we going to make royalties from our work? So big fundamental questions about how they make money and what is the quality and the humanity in their work. And that is true in all fields. And I mean, that's why as a labor movement, we really push this concept of worker voice, which is including workers in the deployment of technology talking to them about what type of technology they need, just like Allison discussed, and what kind of technology really isn't working. Workers are experts in their jobs, right? And they know how to do their jobs and what makes their jobs harder and easier. And so that's a fundamental part of collective bargaining, really, is the ability for workers to have a voice on the job. And so that's a solution that we hold up. I think that in the entertainment industry, they're sort of canaries in the coal mine, and it's really a conversation about how we as a society are going to adopt this technology, right?
Claudia, in your work at Unidos, what kinds of things are you hearing in terms of, and what are you all looking at in terms of how to, this has got to be a tough question too, because we don't really know what this is going to look like, but the training and the skilling, do we know yet what that's going to look like?
So the short answer is we kind of do, just
Okay.
because right now the Aspen Institute, I think, came out with a study that said that 92% of all jobs already require some form of digital skills and digital readiness.
Right.
I mentioned how 35% of Latinos don't have internet. That also results in just shy of 60% of Latinos of working age having low or no digital skills. So at Unidos, we're hyper-focused on trying to close that gap right now in anticipation of the sort of AI revolution that we're all gearing up towards. And we kind of created kind of a whole suite, right, of courses that are designed to help Latinos, help communities kind of develop the skills that they really do need in order to be competitive in the job market that we already have, but then also to help position them to enter new pathways for further upskilling, further more high technical training for emerging sectors that are going to come along with sort of the deployment of generative AI. And so one program in particular that I work on is called Digital Skills for Life. And kind of a funny anecdote is that it's kind of our most basic program, and it's also our largest. I think we have something like 60 individual grantees, community-based organizations that deploy this program. 60, that's 60. Now, we also have Latinx in business and Latinx at work, which are designed to be kind of more advanced skills. And it was Latinx at Work that was actually our very first model. I think it was sponsored at the time by Google, in fact. And we realized that the feedback we were getting from our affiliates who were running these programs at the community level was that people didn't even have enough skills to meet that entry-level class. So we had to go back to the drawing board and kind of redesign this new sort of very entry-level digital skills, quite literally, for life, right? And I think that that's another kind of thing to keep in mind is that as much as this is kind of carrying a lot of economic and workforce and labor implications, this also ripples across our individual lives. Right? We already do we already live our lives online for the most part, and so these skills are both going to be used at home, but also just in general the course of daily life. And I think that that's something else that we do have to keep in mind. Kind of coming back to Amanda's point, that there's kind of a whole other set of implications about what it means for us to exist in a new digital ecosystem.
Yeah. Frank, I want to ask you a question. I know you had some comments as well, so obviously welcome both. Tell us what places and what industries are we already seeing the AI being deployed?
Yeah, for us, and again, we provide IT support services to small and medium businesses. And where we're definitely seeing the application of AI right off the bat is definitely in marketing. So you think about copywriting, ads that have to be developed. We're definitely using it internally for proposal writing as well. So in the nonprofit world, implications or opportunities there for grant writing, donor engagement, I think are wonderful places. I just wanted to circle back on the workforce development piece because again, as a business owner, that's something I'm also thinking about. And again, when I look at our community specifically, right, I'm looking at, okay, how do young individuals, young people in our communities get access to this, right? There are a number of individuals who are not gonna go a traditional four-year college route to kind of get this sort of training. So I'd love to see more of a public-private partnership to expand, let's say, apprenticeships, where we can provide opportunities to individuals that have the aptitude, they have the right attitude to be very successful in this field, and let's grow and provide a pathway to provide opportunities for individuals in our community to kind of get access to these high-paying jobs, if you will.
Yeah. I want to come back to you, Allison, because to Congressman Torres's point, this has to be something where everyone works together. Industry, policymakers, nonprofit organizations, labor unions, and advocates. What is the role of industry, and specifically what's Microsoft doing to work with policy makers to make sure, and again, this is a hard question, obviously, all of these are right now, to meet that balance of not over-regulating, not under-regulating?
Right. Well, first off, our company's AI products and our policies are all guided by 6 guiding principles. And we came out with those very early, and we stand by them. We want the technologies to be fair. We want to be held accountable. With anything we've been developing, we want to make sure there's a human being who's accountable. We want to make sure that everything we develop is inclusive, and we have a strategy for doing so. We want to make sure it's reliable. We want to make sure it's consistently reliable, and make sure that we can iterate to make sure that reliability is built in over time. And then we also want to adhere to all the privacy laws that are already out there. So we're really committed to making sure that all of our legal teams are very clear on not just the broad privacy laws, but also state by state and around the world. That's a lot of different kinds of privacy laws. And then lastly, we want to be transparent. We want to have as much technology documentation available to the public about how we're developing our technologies, and especially AI. So those 6 guiding principles really help us steer our ship. And then we take those policy principles, and we've also created a blueprint for government. And our president, Brad Smith, came to Washington, D.C. on May 9th, and at the museum that's right around the corner that has to do with language and words, I can't remember what it's called offhand, he gave this speech, and he outlined what we are hoping to lean into in terms of being regulated as a technology company. But I did want to say one quick thing about the workforce development piece that Claudia was talking about, and Frank. And one of the things we have also learned, because we've been, like Google, like other companies, have really been funding nonprofits to do training for many, many years, right? And sometimes, like, let's lift up the hood on these trainings. Like, if they're video clips and you're sitting there and you're feeling a little bit brain dead, it's like, how interactive is this? And so then we've invested in people being trained to be trainers, right? So in nonprofits, so train the trainer. And then we've done even bite-sizable, less expensive train-the-trainer kits for nonprofits in all kinds of communities. But this particular model I have loved the most, and I don't know, one day if we do public-private partnerships, I'd love to tee it up for folks here. And that's a skill-a-thon, where you actually take cash and you say to adults, let's have a competition in this community to see who's going to learn the most, get the most certifications, have the most internships, paid internships, all toward a particular competency area, and we'll then take those people and put them up in a spotlight, have an awards ceremony. But this is for adults, because I go back to the teacher. If you do want to get upskilled or reskilled in this technology world, especially with digital skills, and you need an incentive, I think we should be finding those ways to incent people, and sometimes more money is helpful. So those skill-a-thons have been very successful.
That's great. How do we, Claudia, best promote equity, dignity, and fairness as we move forward with this?
Yeah, I think it kind of comes back to one of the things I said at the top of the conversation, and that's making sure that impacted communities, the very communities that have so often been left out of these processes, bring them in early, often, consistently. And so that's the one thing. I think another point that I kind of wanted to land on is, another kind of issue that ties into workforce, that ties into equity, is Latino representation in the tech sector itself. There's the old saying, if nothing about us, without us. And so I think that you can inherently already predict that any kind of tool or product that is put out by these by companies that don't have a particularly diverse employee base, you can imagine that they're not totally reflective of their entire consumer base and the people who they are designing these tools for. So that's another kind of thing that we talk about when we talk about private-public partnerships, about making sure that there's human infrastructure that's built into any kind of regulation or legislation that oversees AI. And it's ensuring that we are seeing equity in the workforce,
Right.
in the people who are designing these technologies. But there's another way that equity plays in here, and that is in the kind of data sets.
That too. Well, it's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that's at 4. Happy hour comes with that one. But it's the data sets, right, that we're training a lot of these machine learning tools on, these algorithms on. And a quick anecdote is that bias can come out of not only the data we put in, right, the skewed data that we put in, but even data we don't put in. So for example, to kind of borrow from sectors is, there's something called the Death in Custody Reporting Act, which requires the government, the DOJ, to keep a running kind of tab or tally on the number of individuals killed by police. Now, despite the fact that this law has been on the books for, I think, over 20 years at this point, it is not enforced and it has never been complied with. So back in 2020, when the murder of George Floyd happened, there became a lot more awareness around the fact that it was journalists that were filling in this gap. And at Unidos, we ran a project where we recognized and realized that the 4 or 5 major data sets didn't capture ethnicity. They only captured race as black, white, or other. So we kind of ran a study, kind of figuring out, parsing through the last names that we could find, running it against census, surname lists, and found that there was an undercount of the estimates of Latinos killed by police by at least a quarter. And that Asians and AAPI individuals were killed at least at rates 30% higher than the data and the estimates reflected. So that's just kind of an example of the decisions we decide to make, or that we do, or the decisions that we make around what information to collect, how we collect it, and for what purpose, all kind of play into this possibilities for bias and inequity when it comes to inputting that into machine learnings or other forms of generative AI. That's how we kind of have come to this idea of garbage in, garbage out, right? If your data set is incomplete and is not totally holistic, then you're going to have the kind of same results and outcomes.
Right. Amanda, how do we, keeping all of this in mind, how do we try to go to that balance of regulation and regulate it in a way that it is free of bias, it is free of those inequities that we've been talking about?
Right, I want to plus on what Claudia said.
Yeah,
nothing about us without us is for us, right? And in the labor movement, there's so many different use cases for artificial intelligence, machine learning technologies. It's hard to generalize, but we can say in general that working people need to be involved in every stage of the innovation process, from the very sort of conception of the idea of an application being built to how it's designed, to the data that's gone into it, and then also how it's deployed, right? You can have a really good technology that's deployed in a way that's very harmful. And so again, I think it's not just working people, but it's all communities that have been marginalized and either overrepresented or underrepresented in the data that's driving these models.
Right.
I do think there's a lot of work that's going into creating testbed systems where systems can be tested, and that's something we need to watch and participate in. And then I really just go back to the sort of, how are we making sure the technology has guardrails so it's not increasing things like redlining, but instead it's creating kind of more just access to things like good jobs and credit. And that comes, it's both the sort of the computer science of the data, it's the testing systems and the regulations that we put on sort of meeting, ensuring that these systems are tested before they hit the market. And then a governance model that continues to evolve as the technology evolves, right? Workers, collective bargaining, and regulation are pretty central to making that work.
Right. Frank, how do small businesses play a role in the actual development of AI, right? Everyone thinks that it's big companies like Microsoft that are doing all the heavy lifting, and of course they are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but small businesses are also part of this big, system that's moving us forward towards a workable AI for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's through innovation. So when I think about AI in terms of the small businesses or startups, their ability to leverage this technology now to come to market even quicker and develop their products and solutions, if you will, leveraging this technology. So to me, it's a real enabler. It's a real empower. I think it's the democratization of this technology that really, for me, is really fascinating as a small business owner, in that you can access this technology with simply, you got to have an internet connection in order to access this technology. But for a lot of us, that's a lower bar than I would say in the past. So I think it has the ability to help to democratize, if you will, access to this technology, bring more smaller companies that are getting started to leverage this technology to create things even better, and use it to build better solutions in the future, if you will.
Allison, when you look at the younger generation, right? Students, my kids, 16 and 18, I can't believe it. They've already grown up on this, kind of. And so they look at it with excitement. How do you kind of look at that younger generation and say, okay, this is going to be something that we're all going to be able to use this for good? Is there anything that worries you in that? Like, are there things that we are way too excited about and not careful enough right now?
I mean, some of this is going to be personal, so
Yeah,
I'm
please.
just letting you know. I mean, I've been looking at some surveys that are coming out from students saying that they love learning algebra right now, let's say, through whatever chat they're using, because they have said, this is the first teacher that gets me. For me, we are really, at the company, we talk about co-pilot, human-centric, human oversight every single day. I mean, human is at the center of our technology, especially AI, like human. And what I would love for the next generation to realize is, especially because social skills are going to be so at a premium, right? As this progresses, we got to have some young people who get that balance. So that's if you say, what's a concern? Getting you, like, I want them out as much as possible in the real world, like interacting with people where it's messy, right? But also I also think about, and our president wrote this book called Tools and Weapons. I don't know if anybody has seen it. But there's a section in there that not a lot of people talk about, but I always loved reading about, and it's about having our future coders, people who love computer science, take some sort of oath, sort of like a doctor's oath, right? Because, I mean, my friend who's a doctor, when she took the oath, it was videotaped. It was a big moment in her life. She cried, It was like, I'm committing myself to be the best doctor for anyone that I possibly can be. I mean, it was more specific than that. But what if one day our future technologists took an oath and talked about putting the rigor in to using non-beta biased data sets? To your point, because we're going to need future technologists who really understand the implications, the societal implications of what they're doing and how they are now the agents for good, can be. So I think of also them, the users, but then also the creators for the future.
We have to go to questions now, but I want to give the opportunity for the panelists to say, if there's one thing that you want this audience to come away with, what is that thing? Claudia.
Luckily, I already said it. Well,
On the spot.
It's that AI truly is just a tool, and a lot of the risks and harms of this tool come from the decisions we make around how it's designed, developed, deployed, and utilized. And I think that that's something that's really important to keep in mind, especially as we're seeing Congress start making moves towards putting together a legislative package, is that going back to picking up on innovation, is that innovation and regulation don't have to be at odds. I think actually the true spirit of innovation would be developing technology that does all the promises that AI has, but then also promotes equity, promotes fairness, takes our world, transforms our world from one that has really been deeply inequitable into one that is actually genuinely equitable, fair, and provides opportunity equally for all of us.
That's great. Amanda?
Well, it's hard to follow that, because I think really that would be the same set of points.
Yeah.
And I think for us, it's really an emphasis on stakeholder engagement and making
Right.
sure that communities are really directly involved in the development and deployment of the technology, including broadband technologies. But then also, have access to workforce development and training strategies that start in elementary school, and that we're really centering worker voice because this technology, it does blur the line between your work and your home in some ways.
Yeah.
And we have to treat people who experience this technology as whole people, right? And we're interested in this being a set of technologies that increase dignity and fairness. And I think there's the potential for that. But I do think, leaning into regulation, I like what you said, like there doesn't have to be, they're not opposed, regulation and innovation, right? It can be done effectively in a way that promotes technology, but also ensures fairness.
Great.
And I think from a small business perspective, I think what I would say it's empowerment, right? I think this technology has the ability to empower small businesses throughout our country to be more efficient, to compete more effectively with with others in their industry, and also to serve their customers at a deeper level as well. So I find it very empowering. This technology can be very, very empowering for small businesses.
Great. Let's open it up to questions. Yes. Okay.
Hi there, my name is
Oh.
Hi there, my name is Juan Navarro. I'm a Senior Director of Policy at the College Board. We're a nonprofit organization, recently launched AP Computer
Can you
Science.
speak up a little bit?
We recently launched AP Computer Science Principles in 2017. I now have over 130,000 students participating in the course. One of the questions that I have for you all is, well, first, you all highlighted some of the opportunities and barriers that exist with interacting with AI. What do you think are some of the most important principles organizations should think about as we work with educators to use AI in the classroom, but also to help students use AI and then shape AI?
Who wants to take that?
Wow, that's a lot.
What was the last part of the question?
How so that students learn about AI but are not shaped by it, meaning that they too can work on these large language models, they can do things to make AI work for them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Please.
So I know from my perspective, from a small business perspective, what I'm trying to do in my local community is to actually partner, so for example, with my local community college, to get students in as interns, paid interns, not free, paid interns into my organization to get them using the technology, right? I think as a business owner, that's kind of my superpower. Again, when I think of all the things, like when I look at what challenges that I face, it's like I kind of think of what can I do as a business owner, what can I do to kind of impact this specific issue? And for me, it's, hey, engaging with my local community college right down the street, providing internships for those students, getting them exposure to the technology, providing them access to some of the great training platforms that we have available, and getting them involved in that technology earlier in the process.
Great.
Hi, thanks so much for the discussion. This is very informative.
Sorry, you keep
I'll bring them this way. She'll come down this way.
So I wanted to ask, we're talking about the future of AI for Latinos, but in general, I mean, AI is in existence now, and we've got, biases in the way that facial recognition is used, right, and disproportionately affects people of color. We've got the way that resumes are read too by AI that also disproportionately affects communities of color, and even license plate readers that are used by public safety officers that actually out undocumented individuals, for example. So I know somebody mentioned about like having an oath for having programmers take an oath. But I think, what are your thoughts on taking it a step further with like a digital civil bill of rights?
I'm happy to take that.
Yeah.
It's funny, the Bill of Rights thing is definitely, I think, something that we talk about. The White House released an AI Bill of Rights, was it last year, earlier this year? Yeah, last year. Time flies. And principles therein are very much, right, kind of like the designed to kind of really preserve the rights that we do have right now, and how those morph right now with the introduction of AI, facial recognition technologies, and so on and so forth. And I would have to say, this to take us maybe a slight left turn is that you hear a lot of the major tech leaders and CEOs, right? A lot of this process around regulating AI kind of accelerated and gained momentum because of the existential threats, right, to civilization. You hear this a lot. From a civil rights perspective, my kind of response to that is we are already living with some of the most existential threats. I mean, 2024 is here. The election season has already started. We've already seen certain candidates use deepfakes and other, AI-generated content in their campaigns. There should be rules and safeguards around that. We already have a Department of Homeland Security that, like you mentioned, deploys facial recognition and license plate readers in a way that's very dragnet, right? There's no kind of, it's all just completely a free-for-all, right? They have no probable cause, right? If you want to start talking about your Fourth Amendment rights to privacy, all of these things are starting to go out the window because of the ways in which we've allowed this technology to continue to be developed unchecked. But then on top of that, we've even allowed our own governments and government bodies to be able to have these kind of technologies and access to them without any safeguards in place, without any real meaningful transparency in place. And that's how we kind of end up with a lot of these threats that keep me up at night and that to me are existential in the current and the now.
Can I just add one thing? We talk a lot at the company about safety brakes, and we talk about how when the elevator was first invented, nobody wanted to go on an elevator until I guess there was this moment. I don't know if it was televised or not, but one of the inventors got on an elevator and clipped the cable, and he was falling to his death, and then he went like this and he had this safety brake, right? And the whole point is, let's all start using the elevator and not be terrified because we've got our company has a safety brake, right? So we talk a lot about, again, human-centric, co-pilot, human, safety brake, and that's one of the things we'd really like to see in legislation because we think that there should be some definite safeguards when it comes to existential threats or critical infrastructure, et cetera. Sorry, go ahead. I know there are other questions.
Yeah, right. Let's keep going.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank the panel.
I don't know.
We got to come down here in a second.
I had a couple folks come and ask me when they saw me walking around with the mic.
Oh, okay.
So they asked me beforehand. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I only have time for a few questions.
Good. First, I want to thank the panelists for coming together and providing us this information. It's amazing. My name is Henry Comas. I am a member of a large, high-capacity not-for-profit out in the New York area. My question is basically for Frank. Frank, you discussed the potential for AI with not-for-profits, especially in the area of recruitment. Can you just elaborate a little bit more based on that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're seeing specifically for nonprofits where we see having, let's say, co-pilot helping nonprofits is in responding to grant requests, right? So grant proposals, constituent engagement, right? Leveraging AI to kind of help you with crafting those letters, thousands of letters, engaging with your community and your constituents, definitely as a game changer for nonprofits. As one example of a use case of how I believe AI can be transformative for nonprofits.
I'm going to give it to you.
I don't need, this one's for Claudia. My name is Alex Luciger, I'm with WM. You were talking about the percentage of individuals in places, right? And I've read that the percentage of...
Oh, they can't hear it.
Yeah. Can we get a microphone?
What? Okay.
Okay.
Where's the microphone?
We need a microphone for this gentleman.
Here she comes. Oh, you know what? Here. This will be quicker.
Look at you.
Nelson.
Solutions oriented. There you go.
Okay. You were mentioning, Claudia, about percentages, and I was interested in the percentage of Latinos in tech, because I've read it's very low, 2% or less, or it used to be. And are the numbers getting better? Because as we talk about AI and utilization of technology, my concern is we're still not getting enough Latinos developing the technology, and the numbers are so low.
100%. I think the number has gone up to 8%, I think, is Latinos make up the tech workforce. But there is another figure that I have. It's a little outdated, but Between 2014 and 2015, the percentage of Latino representation in the tech sector grew 1%, less than 1%.
Wow.
And you can imagine, so that's 5 years, and imagine what kind of, we've gone from not even talking about AI to having ChatGPT-4 and having this conversation in way less than 5 years, right? So that's sort of another, going back to what I was saying about how innovation is not only, right, guided by getting the most high-tech product, innovation is also about making sure that we're able to generate new policies and practices that kind of push that diversity, that bring us into the fold, that actually truly do democratize it, right, in function and not just name, but make sure that access is, equitable and unobstructed so that we can have the most innovative products we possibly can.
Great. Okay.
I just want you to know, for computer science education, we have a huge partnership with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation to make sure that K-12 of computer science is embedded into the schools with the highest percentage of Latinx students, and happy to talk about at least that part of the pipeline.
That's critical. That's really important. Okay, last question. Yes.
Here you go. I unclipped it. I'm so sorry.
Hi. So I think my question was, considering that the idea of creating opportunities for the Latin American community has come up a lot, what are we doing to let the Latin American community know that these opportunities exist in the first place? Because part of the process is them actually having this information to be able to have these opportunities. Thank you.
Who wants to take that?
I feel like I've been hogging it. I'll just say, I can say really quickly that at Unidos, that's exactly what we're focused on right now, and it's through implementing our digital skills programs, our workforce programs, our education programs even. It's making sure that we're starting to go back and integrate, right, and layer on all of these kind of new technologies, new emerging sectors and job markets, right? And it's really communicating that at the earliest stages and as often as we can. And I would say the last thing on that is that it's also important about the message is often not even as important as the messenger. And so I think that's why we work really closely with community-based organizations. I live in DC, I am based here. If you are a single mother in Texas, you want to hear from your local trusted community leader, community partner, whoever that figure is for you, and it's making sure that we're training the trainers in a way that's really, truly culturally competent and helps meet Latinos where they are.
Great. Anybody, any last words? You all have been a wonderful, wonderful, wisdom-filled hour, so thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. Thank you, Microsoft. And if we come away with one other thing other than the amazing responses and wisdom that we got from the panelists, is that all of our voices matter. This is an incredibly important subject that is going to just become that much more critical in the days, weeks, months, years to come. So please make sure that in whatever way possible, you all make your voices heard, locally, at the state level, as well as nationally. Gracias, everyone.